everyone at the company now is a builder. It used to be just the engineers who were the builders, but now if you're a product manager, if you're a designer, or even if you're someone in go-to-market, you are a builder. You have access to these tools that make you one, which is very exciting.
Welcome back to Control-Alt-Lead, the podcast from computing where we talk to IT leaders at the sharp edge of strategy and technology leadership. In this episode, I'm joined by Romain Huet, Head of Developer Experience at OpenAI. We're going to be talking all about the evolving AI ecosystem and the new era of AI coding tools. So, Romain, over to you to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tom, for having me. Super excited to spend time together today. I'm Romain, I lead developer experience at OpenAI. And what that means is really like being the interface between our great like research, product, and engineering teams, but also the broader community of developers, builders who are now using our models, but also our tools like Codex. So very, very exciting time at OpenAI with all of these developments.
Yeah, and my inbox is full of new developments coming from OpenAI. We're seeing a lot of developments from all AI companies, a really fast cadence of updates across the industry, especially around safety, security, responsible deployment. What do you think is driving this acceleration?
Yeah, I mean, like it's a very exciting time in AI because like we've talked a lot about like the models becoming more agentic, the models being able to accomplish more tasks on behalf of the users. And for most of last year, we were getting closer and closer, but we're now at a real inflection point with GPT 5.5 in particular that we just launched like a couple of weeks ago. We see the model's capabilities being so high and developers and builders in particular loving to build with the model, especially in Codex. So we can really see this like momentum where like not only are the models more capable, the time it takes for us to create the next model is also shrinking, right? So I think it's like a real exciting time in terms of like the ability to deploy these models and the ability for builders to leverage those to build applications and integrate AI in their own products.
So development is just speeding up and up and up. So what does that signal about where the AI ecosystem is heading? Is everything just going to continue getting faster? Are we going to hit a point of diminishing returns at some point?
For all we're saying, it's just like all positive right now. And I think like to give you some color also on what's happening is like you're using Codex internally, right? Like, and I think like so for people who may not be familiar with Codex, Codex is our kind of programming teammate. It started as a coding agent, initially in the terminal, but I think now it manifests itself into the Codex app. So the Codex app works on Mac, works on Windows. And it's a truly like magical experience when you start building with it, right? Because you can ask anything to Codex. And it started with coding, but it now takes on like much broader tasks as well, right? Like you can ask anything by connecting all your tools and your context to Codex. You can actually like create a chief of staff, organize your stand-ups, you can create documents, you can actually like obviously like refactor code. So the possibilities are limitless. And so for from our vantage point at OpenAI, we're also leveraging Codex a lot. And so with all the engineers, but also everyone at the company being able to leverage tools like Codex, it means that our velocity is also increasing. We're able to like develop features for Codex a lot faster. And we have this great feedback loop with the developer community at large, where like when they're asking for something new that we don't have yet, our ability to actually bring it to life for them is like much more increased. And sometimes it takes us just like a few days to actually ship new features. That's why your inbox must have many emails from us.
It's definitely creaking under the strain, yeah. And as you and I talked about just before we started recording, just this Monday, I was at a briefing about Codex for journalists. So, another way that Codex can be used, which was really interesting to sit in on.
Absolutely.
And obviously usage is exploding, not least because it can now be used in all these different ways. So I suppose the obvious question is, what is driving that surge? Like, how did it go from coding to journalism and replacing a chief of staff?
Yeah, well, I think like there's a few different reasons for that. First, I think it's like the model capabilities, right? And I think when you get something like GPT 5.5, the model is already smarter than, many of us or most of us. I think like the challenge sometimes for these models to accomplish tasks is the ability to connect to the right context, right? Having access to your tools, having access to your documents. And it turns out like what we've done with reinforcement learning techniques on top of like the models for them to be very good at coding, turns out it actually translates really, really well in any kind of everyday work tasks. And so that's why we see now people using Codex to like tap into their Notion, create slide deck, maybe like, manipulate some Excel files, and all of those properties that we have interestingly in the model becoming more agentic actually benefits all of the tasks. And so that's why you see this inflection point. The rise of the Codex app has been also like a real fun factor that really made it much more approachable. Right now, you have an experience that's like very delightful to use, and that's why we went, for instance, from like 3 million users to 4 million users of on Codex in less than 2 weeks. That's really the pace we're seeing and the momentum we're seeing because the product and the model all come together to make something quite magical.
Obviously, Codex and other similar tools like Claude Code, they're very technically impressive tools. They have a lot of uses. There are concerns about their use, especially in business, though. You have to allow these things deep access to your data, for example. So what, for our audience, are the most important questions IT leaders should be asking any AI vendor before adopting a tool like Codex?
Yeah, I think what's very important is to like deploy these tools in a way where you have like some controls, right? And you have like some visibility into how developers are using them. And one thing, by the way, that we spend a lot of time on was the permissioning system and the sandboxing, like making sure the coding agent actually has the right guardrails in place. I remember a few weeks back when we were kind of due to ship the Windows app, actually, a lot of people were asking us, like, why have we not shipped the Windows app just yet? Well, the reason was we spent a lot of time obsessing about sandboxing to make sure the right permission are in place, including on Windows, where there's fewer primitives at the OS layer. But it's also very important for leaders to have like visibility, into like how people use these tools. And I think like ultimately what really, really matters here is that IT leaders should think about how do I enable more people to do their best work with tools like Codex. And for us, another thing that we want to make sure is that they have the right visibility, the right tokens, but also it has to plug in with your tools, right? It has to bring the right context. So for instance, if you were having a very, very smart model, but it does not have access to your tools at the company, whether it's your CRM or your code base or some other, like maybe like bug tracking systems, then it's not going to perform as well. And another thing that we care a lot about too, which I think IT leaders should consider, is how open source we are. In fact, the Codex CLI and what we call the Codex harness. So the Codex harness is actually the environment around Codex and how it can actually call and access these tools. That's also open source. And to us, I think that's very important too for IT leaders to be able to like see and introspect how this Codex harness functions. So these are just a few ideas, but like basically enabling people to do more, making sure it has access to the right tools. And we're really at this inflection point now in terms of like enterprise adoption, right? And I think it's important for leaders to choose the right tools and empower their teams. I think what I find exciting myself is that everyone at the company now is a builder. It used to be just the engineers who were the builders, but now if you're a product manager, if you're a designer, or even if you're someone in go-to-market, you are a builder. You have access to these tools that make you one, which is very exciting.
So you're talking now about the rise of what has been called vibe coding.
Right. I think vibe coding was this like first, name that Andre Carpati coined. But I think this was this idea that like, well, from a simple way to express in natural language what I'm trying to accomplish, I'm able to create an application. But it actually goes beyond vibe coding when I think about builders, because when I think about builders, I also think about like, if you want to build that internal dashboard, or if you want to visualize some metrics, or if you have a data set that you want to manipulate, or maybe what you're building is also like a slide deck, something that leverages maybe Imagen, for instance. Like you can build all sorts of things now with these tools.
Mm-hmm. You brought up visibility a moment ago, and I'm glad you talked about that, because one of the criticisms that I personally have heard from IT leaders is that AI tools are a black box. They're not transparent in their outputs. I'd love to know your response to that. If people have a concern about, they don't know how an AI tool has reached the conclusions it has.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of work happening on that. I think like we're trying to also like give as much visibility as we can in like the reasoning of the model and how it got to like a certain conclusion. I think what is also very interesting is not to think about these models just as a way to get to an output, but also as like a real teammate that can tackle problems different ways. Like for instance, one of the most exciting features of Codex, I think that's like still underrated, is like Codex code review. Like if you turn on code review, it doesn't matter if the code was written by Codex or written by like a human. Codex code review is quite fascinating at finding bugs and potential vulnerabilities that the best staff engineers might miss, because it's not just looking at the code in a static way. It's also looking at the environment, like running all of the tests in every possible combination of feature flags you might have in your application if it's quite complex and advanced. It's about like Codex security as well that we offer to make sure you find security bugs. So I think like there's also this different facet that I think we don't talk quite enough about with these tools, which is actually making your applications more robust, more bug free, and making sure you can also like empower your engineers to do their best work.
Okay, well, talking about empowering your engineers, what's your view on how the rise of these tools has changed the developer experience? There were previously a lot of concerns about developers being put out of work, that kind of thing. I think that's mostly been put to bed now, but there must be still these ongoing changes to the developer ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, what is absolutely certain is that what it means to be a developer is changing, right? Like when we first started to have tools to simply autocomplete, a line of code in an IDE, to like doing some more like what we call pair programming, maybe like a year or two ago, in an IDE that had like more AI to like write complex functions of files. Like we've moved far beyond that point now, where like you're able to like not just generate like, features, you're able to like accomplish massive ambitious goal. Sometimes it's just like one prompt. So in that new world, I think what's very exciting to me is that like you can really take all of the toil away from what it means to be an engineer or a developer, right? Honestly, no developer I know loves migrating code, loves like, fixing bugs, or loves like, organizing their like stand-ups and things like this. These are all the things that Codex can actually take off of your plate. So you can spend most of your time then to think about like, what are my customers like excited about? Like, what kind of creative idea should I be working on? Should I try some experiment? What kind of features should I bring up in the roadmap, right? Like, what are the things that are exciting to ship that I could ship actually faster than I thought? This is all very exciting. And it's funny because, we always thought about like, oh, like maybe developers will have less and less to do now with these powerful tools. Honestly, it's almost the opposite. Like every time I speak to developers who have been using Codex and especially GPT 5.5 the past couple of weeks, they all tell me like it's so addictive. They just want to build more. They have more ideas to build, more products and apps to build. They just can't stop using it. And it's almost like this like visceral feeling that like, oh, I have these agents that can do amazing things for me. I should leverage them even more. And so if I see one thing, it's like developers being excited and being busier than ever, but on the things they enjoy the most.
So put yourself in a CIO or a CTO shoes. You've rolled out Codex. You've rolled out Codex. You've suddenly got a liberated, empowered development team with lots of free time on their hands. How can you best leverage them?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think like you really have to rethink how your engineering team is configured, and how like you evolve in this world where like everyone is a builder, and also how you shrink your roadmaps, right? for us, like we saw GPT 5.5 was a like a real turning point, and it set a new bar, right? Like to give you some context, like 1 million customers used GPT 5.5 in the first week. And that's like a record for us. Like, and we see how quickly it become to like business infrastructure. So now that the models are so powerful, I think it's up to like everyone to like see how they can bring the context that they need and how can they empower their teams to do more and create more. Um, and I really think that like the time it takes to go from an idea to something you can ship in production is really, really like shrinking by a lot. We've seen it even at OpenAI. Sometimes we have an idea for a feature and like a couple of days later, it's already live. So I think like you have to have that sense of curiosity for these tools. And you really have to encourage like all of your teams to leverage them to do their best work. And if there's one thing, it's that the models are going to get even better very soon. And I would really push like leaders to think about like what's the frontier? Like how can we even like take the most complex tasks, the things that we believe like these tools are maybe not capable of now, and actually try them. And I think they'll be surprised. One thing that we launched, for instance, a week ago that I find absolutely fascinating, and really, really showing the value and the agentic nature of GPT 5.5 is this feature called slash goal. And the idea is very simple. It's like you set a goal for Codex and for the model to achieve. And it could be, hey, like refactor these 10 million lines of code or migrate them to like a new stack. Or it could be like, hey, I have 35 bugs to fix. Go crush that backlog for me. Codex will be relentless to go pursue that goal uninterrupted until it's done. And that to me is quite fascinating, right? What are the things that are kind of sitting at the company? What kind of backlog do you have that you could actually get done with the power of these tools? And what are the craziest, most ambitious ideas that you've been kind of like neglecting for a while that you should start tackling now? I think these are the kind of topics on my mind when I talk to leaders.
There are, though, security concerns around agentic AI, aren't there? We've seen a couple of fairly high-profile cases where agents have gone a bit rogue and done something they weren't meant to. What is the best way to put in guardrails and security controls to sort of make sure that doesn't happen?
Yeah, I think like that's why we invest like a lot in Codex, in particular with this concept of like auto review that we have now by default, like making sure that for every feature that the coding agent will need, or like the agent broadly would need, like you are able to be in the loop to accept that permission either once or all for the entire time of the conversation. We've done a lot of that work as well on a new feature called computer use for now, like not in Europe just yet, but hopefully soon, where like once again the Codex is able to like drive the computer in the background, which is very, very unique. So you can spawn an agent that has its own access to an application, but of course you as the human is still in control. Like Codex will ask you, hey, is it okay in the context of this conversation for me to access this app, for me to accomplish this task? And like it's really, really important for these reviews to be in place and for the human to be in control. So we spend a lot of time on that. And then on the flip side, as I mentioned, I think like securing your applications with Codex Code Review, Codex security is also paramount. And I think like we've seen like tremendous success from companies who had like not enabled Codex Code Review yet, and they turn it on. And you have companies like Datadog, for instance, who have like kind of replayed their past incidents. Like, what if we were actually turning Codex Code Review on in the past? What would have happened? And a significant fraction of these incidents could have been avoided, actually, because Codex could have caught this bug. And the most exciting thing is that the models are becoming so much more capable. This was not even with 5.4 or 5.5. This was 5.3 Codex, I believe. And so I believe like this percentage could be even higher and higher as the models get more capable.
Interesting. Yeah, that's good insight. Thank you for that, Romain. On still talking about the topic of agentic AI, I've talked to plenty of leaders and teams using one or two agents, but so far we're still seeing pretty limited adoption at scale. Certainly no agentic orchestration yet, this web of agents that can talk to each other. What is the real opportunity today for IT teams?
I think it's like really like thinking about like what slows that adoption down, and is it like a lack of access to these modern tools, or is it a lack of curiosity? But we also want to make sure that we empower these companies to like bring all of their contacts, right? Like the models are already incredible, as we mentioned. I think like the harness has really become this like battle and the access to the tools and the contacts. So I think that's why we're investing a lot too in like building a lot of plugins. But one thing that's exciting too that we have not talked about is like how do we help these companies directly to adopt AI? And I think like the tools are great, but it's also about like empowering the humans to use these tools the best they can. So like a couple examples come to mind. For instance, with Codex, we started to experiment with like what we call Codex labs. And so for companies like NVIDIA, for instance, we partnered with them and like we offered Codex to like 45,000 employees. And we spent a bit of time with them for a few weeks to like making sure that every function at the company is empowered to use Codex and get the best out of Codex in the model. And the results have been like amazing. Many more companies now are asking us to do the same thing for them. And I'm sure you've also seen the announcements of the deployment company. And also like this is critical as well in terms of deploying AI, right? Like I think across the industry, as you mentioned.
Yeah, can you just explain for our listeners who may not be familiar, because this was only announced yesterday at the time of recording, what is the OpenAI deployment company?
The deployment company is basically like a new company that's like co-owned by OpenAI and some other partners. But the idea behind it is very simple: is how do we get to like deploy AI and empower like humans in many companies to use these tools. And so, for instance, that includes like forward deployed engineers, like engineers who are like mastering these tools, but you can actually send them to spend time with some companies to make sure they can actually embrace AI. And more often than not, actually, like it's not really the AI piece that is the problem. It's also like making sure that like everything that could possibly get in the way is removed, right? Like it could be like the access to the right data at the right place, things like that, especially for people who want to bring AI not just as a tool to code, but also AI within their product and their application through our APIs. So very excited to do more with this. Like we've had a long history of like, of course, back to OpenAI's mission to do this like iterative deployment and making sure that we put the technology in contact with reality as early and often as possible. This is kind of the next iteration of it, where like we go deeper with some companies to help them embrace AI.
Brilliant. All right, lovely. Thanks, Romain. One final question for you before we end here.
Sure.
You've talked about a lot of impressive projects out there using Codex today. If you were just to pick one to highlight, what would it be and why would it be?
Picking one might be too hard, I'm afraid. You're making it tough. I mean, obviously, like I always go back to OpenClaw because like Peter Steinberger has been like outstanding at like leveraging Codex before even the models got like so good this year. Like as early as like summer, fall last year, Peter was mastering Codex to build OpenClaw. But I think like to me, like from my vantage point, having been in the industry for a while, what I find very, very exciting is to see like prominent leaders and developers who have actually started to see the power of like the models and Codex in particular. Like for instance, I think about Mitchell, the founder of HashiCorp, who's building this terminal called Ghosty. He was struggling with the bug for a long time, like I believe 6 months, and he had not been able to solve it. And in like 45 minutes of thinking, GPT 5.3 at the time was able to solve it. That's quite incredible, right? Or I see many more of these leaders, but also what I find exciting every single day at the moment is like those feel the AGI moment almost, it's like people on X who are using like GPT 5.5 and ImageGen combined to create like new kind of games, new kind of applications. And you see like this creativity being unleashed, which I think like to me is very impressive, right? Like I think you can really tell that like everyone is a builder now and you can just build things, as we said, is really, really manifesting itself, which I find so exciting. And we're only getting started.
Yeah, it's an exciting time in the AI ecosystem and can't wait to see where it goes from here. So, Romain, thank you so much for joining me today. That's been a really fascinating conversation.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Tom. Really, really glad we got to chat and excited for another one.
Yeah, we'll come back to it in a year's time and we'll see how AI is developed from there.
I'm sure it will be vastly different.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Control Alt Lead. Coming up, we've got more great guests, including tech humanist Kate O'Neill and Tanya Cordray, Chief Product Officer at Motorway. Until then, you can follow Computing on LinkedIn and YouTube, and head over to computing.co.uk for more IT leader interviews, news, and analysis. And if you're a leader with an opinion or a story to tell, please do get in touch at tomallen@thechannelcompany.com. Until next time.